So this is part 2 of the mix walkthrough of Daath, No Rest, No End. If you haven't watched part 1, you should do that first, link below. The bass track on this one consists of 3 tracks actually. I have 2 tracks here, but the one that's called Bass STD Bounce is a mixture of the Bogren Digital bass knob, which is my own Ampeg SVT head into an 8x10 inch cab that I've mic'd and tried out in maybe 20 of my mixes until I found something that seemed to work for everything. And then I created this plugin out of it. So I mixed that STD track with what was given to me, which was some sort of like more modern sounding, super low end, super high end kind of thing. And that way I could get that in addition to this more Ampeg rocky kind of thing that really sits well in the mix. And that's what we hear. And then I have a bass DI top thing. We can listen to this. Yeah, so those two together creates a pretty nice, like fresh bass sound in my opinion. This bass DI top is just a DI track that I'm doing a very, very extreme EQ and try to pinpoint the fingers only, no tone, just the fingers of the strings. Some Devilock, excellent plugin for Sound Toys, and an L1 brick wall limiter to keep that sort of pinpointed like this, and that way it sounds like I bring strings into the bass mix. You can listen if I remove this. Gives that really nice sheen, and that can help with bass clarity throughout the mix as well. The bass tracks are fed into my bass sum, which is basically my bass master. On there I have some gimmicks like the C6, which is like the C4 plus. You can use it for side chaining. And I do that. You can see that if we play the bass on a part where there are toms. Let's see, where do we have it? Maybe like this. Yeah, so if you look at where the bass, the toms are playing, and then you can see how this low range band on the C6 is like suddenly dimming a lot. You can probably not really hear it, but it's definitely there. If you would play a tom fill with this bypassed, you would be like filled with low end, because all the bass guitar frequencies and the tom frequencies are sort of going together. But this way, as soon as the tom comes in and play, it will dim down low end in the bass using this C6 thing, and that really clears up the low end and make the toms not overpowering the low end range of your mix. That's a neat trick. My bass bus, additionally, I'm using like this CLA bass from Waves. It's a pretty nasty little plugin. It always does too much, but I found a way to defeat that by using some of its compression and especially the distortion and the overall sound it creates just by putting it on. And then I use Patchwork to load it up as a VST, and then I bring down the mix. So I have it like here at like 26%. So just 26% of the CLA bass sound mixed into my bass track is something that I tend to do quite often. And then we have some basic EQ, and then an L3 that just shaves off a little bit of the low-end resonances that can happen when you actually play a bass. Pretty much it. Let's move on. We can actually listen just to the stuff that I have here so far. If we take all the drum tracks, bass track and the rhythm tracks, yeah, you can hear a pretty tight rhythm unit that seems to work pretty well. They're crafted in a way to also allow for other instruments to come in there. But now when you get rid of everything else, you can hear that it's, you know, pretty, feels like it's pretty massive sounding stuff that they crafted. It's easy to mix stuff that is this well performed and recorded to begin with. The song has a bunch of lead guitars. A lot of them came to me in various states using various softwares, etc. I've been using that for as much as I can. I usually don't want to have a situation where I spend too much time, you know, reamping or whatever. I usually see, can I use this or not? Usually I like using things that someone had an idea about creating for the song, right? Even if I feel that the sound is not perfect, I can usually work with it and create something that feels unique. Because if you redo everything all the time, there is always a risk that you sort of get into the same kind of loop all the time. Some of this is also reamped by me here. No real funny stuff there, I think. I think the lead guitars here is a shitload of tracks. I'm using some sound effects on them. I have this delay that is my secret sauce for lead guitars. I have a bus here with a guitar delay stereo, and for that one I'm actually using the repeater. I think this is from the Slate package or something. I have a modified version of the preset called CLA 8-note delay that works really fine. I used to use this TC6000 unit, hardware unit, and I had a stereo delay there that was like crucial for my mixing. It was so good sounding. And that was like one of the last things that I left when I moved into the box. After trying out, I don't know, 50 different delays, I came across this one and found something that I felt like, yeah, this is the secret sauce I've been missing for my guitar delays. There's also some other stuff here, like it's called the clean space that I sometimes put on. It's Altiverb reverb using the Bill Putnam Echo Cello Studios IR. Also excellent for just creating some sort of depth in there. I'm going through this more thoroughly in my Nail the Mixes. Check those out if you're interested in this geeky kind of things. So I'm using this excellent plugin Soothe from Oak Sounds, small Finnish company. Really cool guys. And this plugin, Soothe and Soothe 2. Let's do the Soothe 2. I don't think that was around when I did this mix. Maybe it was, I didn't have it. And this plugin is some sort of resonance seeker. And you have the depth thing here. Let me try it out on some audio, see what we have here. Some lead guitar. Yeah, so basically working sort of like a multi-band compressor or a dynamic EQ with an infinite amount of bands that will just find all the peaking resonance point and put them down for you. A little bit dangerous. It can sort of suck the life out of your mix if you use it too much, but it can be really, really good for dynamically and very, very phase coherent go in and sort of notch away irritating frequencies. I tend to use it on lead guitars for sure, but also vocals quite often, which is like a typical thing where the voice and the microphone would have these resonance points that are just really annoying. You could sort of EQ yourself to death. Sometimes also with overheads or cymbals, I tend to go for this plugin. So well done, Finnish people. All right, so the next big section here would be keyboards. This is Jesse Zuretti that has been arranging and doing orchestra and keyboards for Daath. I guess he is in the band now. If he's not, then he should be. Anyway, this stuff here is some really good stuff, cool stuff, but also giving me some gray hairs, because all this stuff, the more information you put in, the harder it is for everything to be heard, right? That's just laws of physics. For everything you put into your arrangement, something else needs to be a little smaller to be heard. So that was like the main big challenge with this mix. But this sounds great. Like if we listen to strings here, for example. It's all sample based, but it sounds great. Let's put on the winds as well. Flutes, brass. And then the percussion. And choirs. Yeah. I'm mixing this quite dry. If this would be an orchestra version of the song, I would definitely try to use the orchestra hall a little bit more, so to speak. I would like deplace them a little bit more. But since this is inside a death metal band sound, I need to keep them pretty dry for them to actually have a chance of being heard through the mix. So this is laid out with all the different pieces like this given to me. I prefer to always have it like that. Sometimes people send me like pre-mixed stems of a string section or a brass section, and that's a neat idea. But once I get into the mix, it's always compromising. Like you feel like I really want to treat those trombones a little bit different, or I need my violin to get rid of some of the mids, for example, or whatever, or control the low end of the cellos. These tracks over here are summed up. I have been mixing all of these using the C4 actually. I do that sometimes. The C4 is extremely smooth and forgiving when it comes to level ride various orchestra elements, I've noticed. It usually would land on my string tracks. You shouldn't have to do too much to an orchestra. Usually if it's high quality samples, they usually sound good. There's been like a few hundred years of development, like acoustical and placement development to make an orchestra sound good. So usually I try to avoid doing too extreme stuff, other than perhaps riding the compression rate and the volume. Put them in some sort of room, maybe sometimes distort lower element if it needs to cut through a mix. And that way it usually blends in quite well. Then you can sort of work with an overall EQ for the orchestra, maybe to sort of additionally fit it in. Like here, all of these go to my orchestra master track, right here. And on there, I'm using nothing. That's how it can be. All right, so let's see how all of this sort of works together. The orchestra have their own parts in the song, and the keyboards have other parts, I should say. Listen how it sounds together with the bass and rhythm guitars. It's pretty neatly arranged together. You can almost see the rhythm guitars having the cello function here of this orchestra part. That's really cool. Let's move on to vocals. You can see that there are quite a few vocal tracks here. Nothing too extreme. No clean singing, thank God. I like clean singing too. But from a mixing perspective, it's so much easier, to be honest, with the growls. Clean singing has, I would usually count it to take maybe twice the amount of mix work or time to mix proper clean vocals compared to growls. The growling, the distorted sound of the growl just makes it so much easier to mix as well, compared to clean singing, where you have a more, I don't know, less complex in a way, but still harder to mix sort of harmonic or frequency range. So this tracks that we hear on vocals, you can solo. Sorry for this, Sean. Should never solo listen vocals.
Another violent assembly, ingress and respite, on the verge of insanity, conflicted inside. It is spoken, I hear fear because of wrath.
Yeah, so you can hear that beyond the normal distortion of his throat, you can also hear a little bit of distortion that I've added to the mix just to make it a little bit more even and to be able to hear the harmonic content in the voice a little better. It's pretty compressed, not too bad perhaps, but it is. I am using a whole hardware chain here, where it goes into a LA2 and an 1176, reversed order actually, 1176, LA2, and then a distressor. And I'm using this British mod thing on the distressor where you can get really fast release times and make it distort. So the distortion you hear is mostly from the distressor actually. Beyond that, I have some mix plugins, some additional distortion, compression. No, actually not on this one. Here I went full outboard more or less, and then I have a C4 just to tame the vocals a little bit.
Another violent assembly, ingress and respite.
Hardly anything, to be honest. And then the EQ, and there I do have a dynamic EQ in the range where the sibilants or the S sounds are. So I'm using this as a deesser. I wouldn't say that that's a common way of doing it for me. Usually I would have a separate deesser, but that's how I did it here for whatever reason. You can also see that I'm going almost completely dry with the vocals. It's just a tiny bit of a small room there. And I'm using a Dimension D, sending to this one, Roland classic 80s effect that is used on every R&B track you ever heard, to make the vocals a little bit more dense and fill the stereo space without sounding like a chorus too much. That's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. It's all about finding the sweet spot of compression ratio. Once you have that going and the distortion level sort of works as an EQ as well, then the vocals should sit. If they don't, then you're doing something wrong. All the vocals here are fed into my vocal master track, where I do have some additional EQ just for a little bit of clarity. I guess that's something that came on a little bit later in the game. I'm using the CLA vocal effect, usually hardly with anything on, a little bit of that pitch widener that is in there. But it has some sort of magic touch to it just by running it through. Doesn't destroy the same way as the CLA bass plugin does, but this one, I would say, would always find its way onto my vocal master bus. Yeah, pretty old by now, but it still works pretty well. I usually don't use the effect so much in it, but a little bit. And then it's the Soothe plugin on the vocals here. I guess that's also part of sort of the EQ here. If I wouldn't have that one, maybe my EQ track would have been a little bit more detailed or intricate. Look at that one. Yeah, all of this is within less than a dB what's happening there, but it has a function. And since I put it not on the individual track here, but on my vocal master, it would actually start to work a little bit more once you stack more tracks on it. But there's a distinction there. If you have several vocal tracks that are problematic, I would definitely go individual and do the soothe plugin on them. But here, where I think all the vocal tracks are sounding pretty fine, I would prefer summing them up and then do soothe on the whole group of tracks. So we could see how that works here on the chorus. Yeah, quite some bit. I should also say that the mix is brought down here to 70%, so it's letting through some of the original signal there as well. Yeah, same thing on the chorus, a little higher vocals. Maybe I'm pinning that one a little bit more in my hardware chain. Can actually see how it looked before my bounced hardware, like the raw file that I got was like this, a little bit more dynamic. And then when I bounced it, dropped in volume a little bit, but it also flattened out a little bit. And that is part of my sound here. Then there is a vocal arrangement courtesy of Andrew Wade. Did a very good job capturing these vocals. Made it easy for me. Thank you, Andrew. And there are all sorts of dubs and high and low and whatnot. And to some extent, I've also been muting some of it depending on where I felt that it could be good to boost a little bit extra or where the boost was not needed. So I preferred going in on just a few spots with the overdub on the verses, keeping them a little bit more in your face and then widen things up and work more with overdubs on the choruses. That's usually what I tend to do. And the mixing here on the chorus, pretty much the same, I believe. You can see that I have inactivated tracks up here, or plugins up here. Just an EQ for mainly setting the output volume into my hardware chain. Insert, hardware insert, and then the C4, and EQ. That's pretty much it. And then I'm sending main vocal track for the chorus and for the verses onto this key bus thing that I was talking about earlier, how I sort of key gain riding compressor and whatever it's called again, track spacer, so that the orchestra, keyboards, lead guitars, and also the rhythm guitars will sort of yield a little bit for the lead vocals whenever it's active. And for these other tracks here, we have chorus singing, low dub, high vocals, etc. You can see that I'm not panning them out fully. Sometimes I would do that, but I guess I wanted to create a little bit more focused vocal package and then let guitars and orchestra sort of live on the side of it a little bit. It's the same here. It's like, it's very properly recorded vocals from Andrew. I'm doing some C4 thing here just to sort of auto mix it or tame it a little bit. Then I have some EQ, which is basically just some resonance handling and low cuts on some occasions. It was one of the tracks that needed a little bit of deesser. Then I used this Renaissance deesser. It's one of the 3-4 deessers that I tend to go for, depending on the task. That's pretty much it. What I usually do with vocals is that I iron out what kind of sounds I need for the vocals. For example, if there is a verse vocal that is more or less on its own, then I tend to always have its own track for that one. If I have range differences, then I would probably split that into 2 tracks, even if I get it delivered on one single track, you know, chorus, verse, C part, whatever. I tend to break it out, and even if it's very small changes, usually there will be some sort of change in the sound that I need to adapt in case there are more overdubs or the range is different, if the surrounding music is different. And then I do what I can to keep my cork floating, meaning that I want the vocals to stay there, like on all words, all syllables. They need to be just there, just right, sounding at the correct volume. You can see that I do some automation here. I guess on this track it's not as much as it could be, depending on how it's recorded and how it's singed. Sean is also an excellent singer, making sure that everything gets through there. Despite his beard, I'm using the De-Bearder plugin from Plugin Alliance, which is basically demuffling bearded men's vocal tracks. All right, I think we have sort of a rundown how I usually do things. There's a smorgasbord of various auxiliary tracks on the vocals here that I have my effects on, but I'm hardly using them in this mix at all. It's like a sort of a template that I bring in some different lexicons, plate reverbs, some different delays and stuff for my vocals that I just can, easily access without having to go through and creating them all again, ground up. So yeah, this is an overview of how a mix made by me can sort of look like. It would always be depending on how it sounds, how complex the mix is and whatnot. But I try to maybe not reinvent the wheel every time. There are some constants in my mixing that I try to always come back to. And then depending on what it sounds like, that will guide my decisions throughout the mix. So Daath, difficult band to mix, but fantastic music, and I enjoyed it a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed this run through. Wait for the next Daath song come out. It will be a blast, I promise you.